The gates of the Atherton estate slid open with a whisper, a sound so expensive it was almost silent. I steered my car onto the crushed gray gravel, the tires crunching with a rhythmic, percussive consistency that I usually found soothing. Not today. Today. The sound felt like bone fragments grinding together. I sat in the driver's seat for exactly 60 seconds. I checked my watch, a vintage Cartier tank, inherited from a grandmother who actually liked me. 10:59 a.m. Punctuality is a liability in this house. Arrive too early. And you're anxious. Arrive too late. And you're disrespectful. I hit the 1-minute mark and stepped out. The air in Atherton is different. It's filtered through the lungs of venture capitalists and scrubbed clean by industrial-grade irrigation systems. It smelled of damp earth and something synthetic. The $80 Nest eucalyptus candles my mother keeps burning in every room to mask the scent of her own stagnation. I smoothed down the front of my Loro Piana sweater. It was charcoal gray, the color of a rainy Tuesday, and cost more than most people's monthly rent. In this family, clothing isn't an expression of self. It's a ballistic vest. If I looked poor, I was a charity case. If I looked flashy, I was trying too hard. I chose the quiet luxury of the invisible professional. It was my favorite camouflage. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling monument to transparency that hid absolutely everything. Floor-to-ceiling glass, black steel beams, and white oak. It was a masterpiece of minimalist architecture, designed to look like a sanctuary. To me, it looked like a specimen jar. I pushed the heavy pivot door open. Elena, you're actually on time for once. My mother's voice drifted from the kitchen. It wasn't a greeting, it was a calibrated strike. She was standing by the marble island, clad in cream-colored silk that flowed around her like a deceptively calm sea. She didn't look up from her green juice. Her hands, despite the layers of La Mer cream, had a slight tremor. The traffic on the 101 was cooperative. I replied. My voice was flat, modulated, devoid of the jagged edges of emotion. I call it my deposition tone. You look tired, she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes performed a rapid-fire audit of my face, searching for a flaw to exploit. Is that audit job of yours still keeping you in those windowless rooms? You really should consider a supplement or appeal. You're starting to look like the files you read. Data point 1. Projection. I thought, she feels invisible in her own aging, so she projects decay onto the youngest person in the room. The work is fine. Mother, it pays for the Loro Piana, I said, my tone surgically dry. Oh, honey, don't be defensive. It's just that we worry, especially now that Julian is doing so well. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear in Allbirds and a Patagonia vest. Julian bounded into the kitchen, the golden child aura practically shimmering off him. He looked like the poster boy for a top 30, under 30 list that he probably paid to be on. He didn't walk, he pivoted. The sister of the hour, Julian chirped, leaning in for a performative hug that I didn't return. He smelled of expensive hair clay and the metallic tang of an energy drink. Glad you could make it to the pre-celebration. Did you see the news? Aether AI just hit another milestone. We're basically the future of the valley. I saw the LinkedIn post. I said, a lot of buzzwords. Julian, very little about your burn rate. The smile on his face didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed. It was the look of a man who knew he was lying but had convinced himself the lie was an asset. Always the auditor. He laughed, though the sound was hollow. You see the world in black and white. Elena, that's why you're the one checking the boxes while I'm the one building the boxes. Julian is a visionary. Elena, my mother added, her voice sharpening. He doesn't have the luxury of being small-minded with details. He has a world to change. You could learn a thing or two about ambition. I looked at them both, the aging socialite clutching her wellness, and the fraudulent prince clutching his vaporware. The room felt smaller. The glass walls seemed to press inward, the eucalyptus scent becoming cloying, almost suffocating. My throat tightened. A physical manifestation of the gaslighting I'd endured for 30 years. To them, I was the difficult one. The scapegoat. The girl who asked too many questions that broke the beautiful fragile image of the family. I took a slow, deep breath, centering myself in the one thing they couldn't touch. Melogits. Brunch is served on the terrace, my mother announced, her tone dismissive. Try to be pleasant, Elena. It's a big week for people who actually matter. I followed them out, my footsteps silent on the white oak floors. I was the shadow at their feast, the ghost in their machine. They thought they were inviting a guest they could kick. They didn't realize they had invited an auditor. And the thing about an audit is that once it starts, you can't stop the truth from coming out. I sat down, picked up my heavy silver fork, and began to wait. My apartment in San Francisco is the antithesis of the Atherton estate. It's a high-rise loft in the East Cut. All exposed concrete and muted gray textiles. There is no glass to look through. Only windows that face the fog. It's private. It's quiet. It's mine. I arrived home at 8:00 p.m. The silence of the elevator ride acting as a chemical peel for the layers of family I had to wash off. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I didn't need them. I moved through the dark with the muscle memory of someone who trusts their own architecture. I went straight to my office. It's a room designed for the isolation of truth. Dual 3.2-inch monitors sat like silent altars on my desk. I sat down, the ergonomic chair clicking into place, a precise, satisfying sound of mechanical alignment. I reached for my mug. The espresso was stone cold, bitter, and exactly what I deserved for spending 4 hours pretending Julian's Series C wasn't a hallucination. I took a sip, letting the acidity wake up my brain. I was supposed to be finalizing a mortgage application for a small vacation property in Sea Ranch, a place where the neighbors are trees and the wind doesn't give unsolicited advice. I logged into my encrypted portal to download the latest credit pull. File credit, report, Elena, Vance, final, PDF. I opened it, my eyes, trained by a decade of forensic auditing to spot a decimal point out of place in a 1,000-page ledger, didn't even have to scan. They locked onto the anomaly instantly. Total liabilities. Armayan. Sibawusher. Ling ling ling. I stopped breathing for a second. Not out of fear, but out of the sheer, offensive stupidity of the number. My liabilities should have been $0. I buy everything in cash. I don't believe in leverage. I believe in liquidity. I scrolled down. There it was, tucked under commercial bridge loans. Lena, Silicon Peak Capital. Amount, Armayan. Sibawusher. Ling ling ling. Guarantor. Elena Vance. I felt a familiar coldness settle in my chest, the auditor's chill. It's the state of mind where emotion is purged to make room for data. I wasn't the difficult daughter anymore. I was a senior forensic auditor looking at a crime scene. I reached for my mechanical keyboard. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was sharp, rhythmic. A firing squad of keystrokes. I bypassed the consumer-level reports and went straight into the back end of the loan filing. I pulled the digital signature packet. My name was there, scripted in a neat, cursive font that looked like mine, but lacked the slight, aggressive tilt. I give my V's. The IP address used to e-sign the document wasn't from my VPN. It was a static IP. I ran a reverse trace. The result flashed on the screen in a harsh blue glow, registered to Ether AI. Inc. Ether AI. Julian's milestone. He hadn't just lied at brunch. He had harvested me. He had used my pristine credit score, a score I had built like a fortress to bridge the gap in his failing fantasy. He had turned his sister into a line item in his fraudulent budget. I stood up and walked to my printer. The machine groaned to life, spitting out the physical pages. I liked the feel of paper. It's harder to gaslight a physical document. I grabbed a red highlighter from my desk drawer. The cap came off with a sharp pop. I sat back down and began to bleed the pages red. I highlighted the date of the loan. 3 days after Julian had asked me for my social security number for the family trust updates. I highlighted the disbursement account. A shell company registered in Delaware. Data point 2. Narcissistic entitlement. I whispered to the empty room. The golden child believes all assets in his orbit belong to him. He doesn't see theft. He sees resource reallocation. The cold espresso sat forgotten. The blue light of the monitors reflected in my glasses, turning my eyes into two glowing, analytical orbs. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to scream. You don't scream at a balance sheet. You correct it. I spent the next 4 hours digging deeper. Julian was sloppy. He thought because I was just an auditor, I wouldn't notice the complexity of his shell game. He forgot that my entire career is built on finding people who think they are smarter than the IRS. Bidva. Zero am. I found it. The bridge loan was just the tip. He had been siphon feeding from our parents' retirement trust for 18 months. He was burning $400. 000 a week on customer acquisition that didn't exist. Julian wasn't the future of the valley. He was a Ponzi scam na Patagonia West. I leaned back, the rough texture of the paper against my fingertips. My mind was hyper-focused. A streamlined engine of retribution. I looked at the highlighted pages. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a federal felony. And Julian had left the front door wide open. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt lighter. The weight of the glass house in Atherton was gone. In its place was the heavy, solid certainty of a paper trail. Julian wanted a celebration for his Series C. I was going to give him a grand opening he'd never forget. I picked up the red highlighter one last time and drew a circle around his name. The ink was wet, bright, and final. The meditation pavilion sat at the edge of the Atherton property. A detached structure of cedar and glass floating over a koi pond that probably cost more to maintain than a public school's annual budget. It was designed to be a zone of high vibrational healing, to me. It was a soundproofed bunker for denial. I stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with the cloying, humid scent of a high-end diffuser lavender mixed with something earthy and expensive. My mother was seated on a white linen zafu, her posture unnaturally straight. A Tibetan singing bowl sat on the floor beside her. She didn't open her eyes when the door clicked shut. "You're carrying a lot of static, Elena," she murmured, her voice airy and detached. "Your energy is jagged. It's disrupting the flow of the room." Data point 3. Spiritual gaslighting. In this house, if you have a problem with being defrauded, it's not a legal issue, it's an energy issue. You aren't a victim, you're just unaligned. I'm here to talk about the family trust. "Mother," I said, my voice cutting through the artificial serenity like a scalpel. I didn't sit. I stood by the glass wall, watching a koi fish circle aimlessly in the water below. "Money is just energy. Darling, if you obsess over the numbers, you block the abundance." She finally opened her eyes. They were glassy, the pupils slightly dilated even in the bright morning light. I moved closer, my boots silent on the cedar planks. On the low table next to her sat a glass of murky green juice and a vintage Hermes silk scarf, haphazardly tossed over a small, amber-colored object. "Julian mentioned he's been optimizing the trust assets for his Series C," I said, watching her face. "He said you gave him the green light to move some things around." Her hand flew to the scarf, her fingers twitching. She adjusted the silk. But she wasn't fast enough. I saw the edge of a prescription bottle, one with a label that didn't belong to a wellness guru who preached clean living. Julian is a genius. Elena. He's manifesting a legacy for all of us, she said, her voice rising half an octave. He needed a little bridge. A temporary adjustment. It's all part of the vision. A temporary adjustment of $2.5 million, I asked. My tone remained clinical. Devoid of the heat she wanted so she could call me hysterical. And what about your retirement accounts? Have you checked the balances lately? Or are you too busy manifesting? She picked up the singing bowl mallet and struck the rim. The sound was a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my teeth. It was an aggressive act of silence. I don't appreciate this tone. You've always been so cynical, so focused on the flaws. Her hands were shaking now. Affine. Rhythmic tremor that she tried to hide by clutching the mallet. Julian told me you'd try to sabotage him. He said your jealousy would get the better of you. I looked at the pill bottle under the scarf. Iprazolam. High dosage. I realized then that she wasn't just a victim of Julian's fraud. She was a co-conspirator in her own destruction. She knew the house of cards was wobbling. The pills weren't for a condition. They were to keep the reality from breaking through the wellness filter. This isn't about jealousy, Mother. It's about math. And the math says this house is already gone. Leave, she whispered, her face hardening into a mask of serene hatred. You're bringing low vibrations into my sanctuary. I won't have it. I didn't argue. There is no point in auditing someone who has already declared bankruptcy of the soul. I turned and walked out, the scent of lavender sticking to my clothes like a funeral shroud. As I walked back toward the main house, I didn't feel the sting of her rejection. I felt the thrill of a confirmed hypothesis. The wellness facade was crumbling. The mother was medicated into oblivion. And the brother was a predatory thief. I pulled out my phone and sent a one-word text to my contact at the forensic lab. Proceed. The air in the garden felt thin, claustrophobic. The manicured hedges looked like bars. I wasn't just leaving a meditation pavilion. I was marking the exits of a crime scene. I had all the data I needed. The only thing left to do was to watch the explosion. The silence of my loft was different tonight. It wasn't restorative. It was industrial. The air felt charged, ionized by the heat of dual processors and the relentless hum of the high-speed scanner. It was 1:00 a.m. I didn't drink the espresso anymore. I just inhaled the steam, letting the bitterness sharpen my focus. My mouth tasted like copper, the distinct metallic tang of sustained adrenaline and sheer, cold-blooded intent. I leaned into the glow of the monitors. I wasn't just looking at my own files anymore. I had breached Julian's personal cloud. He was a visionary, which in the tech world often means someone too arrogant to use two-factor authentication or a unique password. His password was his childhood dog's name, followed by the year he graduated from Stanford. Predictable. Vulnerable. The scanner fed on the documents I'd liberated from the Atherton house. A rhythmic whir-snap-whir that sounded like a heartbeat. I began the cross-reference. I magnified the signature on the Silicon Peak loan to 400%. On the screen, the ink pixels became a grainy landscape of fraud. I could see the hesitation in the stroke, the minute tremor where the digital pen had faltered. It was a high-resolution lie. Data point 4. The fraudster's hubris. Julian didn't just steal. He performed. He thought the complexity of the shell companies Ether Holdings, LLC, Blue Horizon Equities, Vance Heritage Trust would act as a labyrinth. He didn't realize that to a forensic auditor, a labyrinth is just a straight line with too many corners. Clack, clack, clack. I began to map the flow. The $2.45 million bridge loan hadn't gone to payroll or R&D. It had been diverted within 48 hours. 400,000 to a luxury real estate broker in Miami. 150,000 to a private jet charter service. And then, the most damning, a $2 million transfer to a management fee account that led directly back to Julian's personal crypto wallet. My eyes burned. But I didn't blink. I was in a predatory flow state. I felt like a shark sensing a drop of blood in 1,000 gallons of water. Julian wasn't just burning investor money. He was cannibalizing the family. He had drained my father's 401k. He had liquidated my mother's emergency bond portfolio. They weren't just broke, they were underwater. And they were smiling for the cameras. The distant sound of a 3 a.m. foghorn rolled in from the bay. Allo? Mournful groan that echoed through the concrete walls of the loft. It felt like a warning for everyone but me. I pulled up the whistleblower portal for the SEC. I didn't fill it out yet. Not yet. I wanted the spectacle. I wanted the Series C Gala to be the setting of his absolute, unrecoverable ruin. I looked at the folder I'd compiled. It was beautiful. A masterpiece of evidence. Every invoice. Every forged signature. Every unauthorized transfer was tagged and indexed. I had built a digital gallows. And Julian had provided the rope, The grain of the paper felt like sandpaper against my fingertips. I stood up and walked to the window. The fog was thick. A white shroud swallowing the Salesforce tower. I wasn't the rebellious daughter who couldn't fit in. I wasn't the difficult one who ruined the mood at brunch. I was the one who survived. I was the one who saw the rot when they were too busy admiring the glass. I turned back to the screen and hit print. The sound of the laser printer was the only thing I heard. It was the sound of a settled account. The sun wouldn't be up for another 2 hours. But the night was over. The pivot was complete. I was no longer defending my credit score. I was executing an audit of the soul. The St. Clair Club in Atherton is where Silicon Valley goes to pretend it has old money lineage. It's a sprawl of Tudor-style architecture with modern, cold white interior lighting that makes everyone look like they're under a microscope. I arrived at 7:08 p.m. I was wearing a bespoke, charcoal gray suit double-breasted. Sharp shoulders. Silk-lined. It wasn't a party dress, it was a uniform of war. I felt the weight of the encrypted USB drive in my interior breast pocket, resting directly over my heart like a steel plate. The air in the ballroom was thick. A suffocating blend of truffle oil, seared sea bass, and the metallic, ozone scent of a dozen high-powered projectors. It was the smell of disruption. I moved through the crowd, my expression a carefully curated blank space. I didn't take a glass of champagne from the passing servers. I needed my senses unclouded. I watched the room through the eyes of a predator at a watering hole. Julian was at the center of a hive of tech bros in fleece vests. Their laughter a muffled, arrogant roar that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Data point 5. The ego echo chamber. Julian thrives on the validation of men who are just as hollow as he is. He's not selling a product. He's selling a mirror. My mother found me near the bar. She was draped in a gold sequined gown that made her look like an Oscar trophy. Her eyes wide and glassy. The alprazolam was clearly doing the heavy lifting tonight. She clutched a glass of Baccarat crystal, the ice clinking with a rhythmic, nervous energy. "Elena, you look so severe," she said, her voice wavering between a mock whisper and a slur. "Couldn't you have worn something with a bit more joy? This is Julian's night. Try to look like you're happy for someone else for once. I'm here to witness the results of Julian's hard work." "Mother," I said. It wasn't a lie. I was just the only one who knew what those results actually were. "Just stay out of the way," she hissed, her fingers tightening on her glass. "The Sequoia partners are here. Don't go talking about tax codes or whatever it is you do to kill a conversation." She drifted away, a golden ghost in a room full of sharks. Then came the toast. The room dimmed, and the artificial white stage lights flared to life. Blinding and clinical. Julian stepped onto the podium. He looked perfect, the tanned, fit, charismatic face of a billion-dollar lie. He tapped the microphone, the feedback a sharp, jarring screech that made my teeth ache. "First off, thank you," Julian started, his voice a masterclass in practiced humility. Ether AI isn't just my dream, it's a family legacy. And speaking of family, he scanned the room until he found me standing by the periphery, half hidden in the shadows of a marble pillar. He smiled the same smile he used when we were children, and he'd just broken one of my toys and convinced our parents I'd done it. My sister, Elena, is here, he said, and a spotlight swung toward me. I didn't blink. She's the realest of the family, a forensic auditor. She spends her days looking for mistakes in other people's lives. It's a tough job, being the person who only sees the world in red ink while the rest of us are busy painting it in gold. A ripple of condescending laughter moved through the crowd. She told me once that she didn't understand the vision of Aether AI. Julian continued, his voice dripping with faux pity. And I get it. Not everyone is built to see the future. Some people are just built to count the dust in the present. But tonight, even a boring auditor like you has to admit, the numbers don't lie. My mother laughed a high, brittle sound that cut through the applause. I watched her. I watched Julian. I felt the cool, smooth texture of the marble bar top under my palm. I wasn't humiliated. I was fascinated. I was observing the exact moment their arrogance reached its peak, the moment before the freefall. Data point 6. The zenith of narcissism. The subject feels so untouchable, they begin to taunt the very person holding the evidence of their demise. It is the final, involuntary stage of self-destruction. To the future, Julian shouted, raising his glass. To the future. I whispered to myself, my voice flat and final. The room erupted in applause, the sound of 100 hands clapping for a ghost. I turned away from the stage and began to walk toward the tech booth at the back of the hall. It was time to stop counting the dust and start clearing the room. I didn't rush. A person in a hurry looks guilty. A person with a purpose looks inevitable. I stepped into the shadows of the AV booth. A small, darkened cockpit elevated above the ballroom floor. The technician, a kid in his early 20s with a headset and a distracted gaze. I didn't even look up as I approached. Excuse me, I said, my voice low and resonant. Carrying the authority of a federal subpoena, there's a critical update for the final slide deck. SEC compliance requirement. Julian sent me. He hesitated, but I held his gaze with a chilling buyer. Professional stare that suggested his entire career depended on the next 5 seconds. I handed him the encrypted USB drive. Slot 4. It's set to auto-override. He plugged it in. Click. The sound of the trap snapping shut. On stage, Julian was basking in the fading echoes of applause, his arms outstretched as if to catch every drop of adulation. And now, he shouted, his voice thick with unearned triumph. Let's take a look at the projected growth for Ether AI over the next 24 months. The giant LED screens behind him flickered once, twice, and then transitioned. But the graph that appeared wasn't gold. It was red. A deep, jagged, bleeding red. It wasn't a projection of growth. It was a consolidated statement of cash flows, reconstructed with forensic precision. At the top, in bold, 72, Point Helvetica, were the words, Notice of Material Fraud and Identity Theft. The room didn't gasp. It didn't scream. It did something much worse. It went absolutely, biologically silent, the kind of silence that happens right before a predator strikes. I stepped out of the booth and walked to the edge of the mezzanine, overlooking the ballroom. I didn't need a microphone. The silence was so thick my voice carried easily. If everyone could direct their attention to page 4 of the projection, I said. My voice was a scalpel cool, dry, and terrifyingly sharp. You'll see the $2. 45 million bridge loan, Julian mentioned. Except, as the bank records on the screen clearly show, that loan was secured using a forged power of attorney and a stolen identity. My identity. Julian froze. The tanned, charismatic mask didn't just slip. It disintegrated. Under the harsh white glow of the projector, his skin turned the color of wet ash. He looked small. He looked like a child caught with his hand in a jar of broken glass. Elena. What the hell are you doing? He hissed, his voice cracking. But the microphones on his lapel caught it. It echoed through the hall, pathetic and shrill. I'm doing my job. Julian, I replied. My eyes locked on his. I'm auditing the vision. I tapped a command on the remote in my hand. The screen shifted to a series of wire transfers. To the Sequoia partners in the front row, the $10 million you committed last month. It didn't go to the neural network. It went to a shell company called Blue Horizon Equities, which, as you can see from the tax ID on the screen, is a Delaware entity owned solely by Julian Vance. From there, it was laundered into a private crypto wallet to fund a lifestyle our parents' retirement fund couldn't support anymore. I looked at my mother. She was standing frozen. Her glass of Baccarat crystal tilted at a dangerous angle. The gold sequins on her dress caught the light of the fraud report. Shimmering like a dying star, she looked at the screen, then at Julian, then at me. For the first time in 30 years, she couldn't find a way to make it my fault. The data was too heavy. This is a lie, Julian screamed, his voice reaching a manic, desperate pitch. She's unstable. She's always been jealous. Security. But no one moved. The tech bros in the fleece vests were already checking their phones, their faces pale, as they realized they were witnesses to a federal crime. The lead investor from Silicon Peak Capital stood up, his face a mask of cold, corporate fury. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at me. He was a shark recognizing another shark. Julian, the investor said, his voice like grinding stones. Don't say another word. I walked down the stairs. The click of my heels on the marble, the only sound in the room. I stopped 3 feet from Julian, up close. He smelled of sour sweat and panic. The golden child was gone. There was only a scavenger left. The FBI is in the lobby. Julian, I said, my voice a quiet, clinical whisper meant only for him. I sent them the full ledger an hour ago. You wanted to build a box, well, you did. It's 6 by 8. And it has bars. I turned to my mother. I reached out and gently straightened her Hermes scarf. She flinched as if I'd burned her. The house is being seized in the morning. Mother, I said, my tone devoid of malice. Purely informational. I'd suggest you pack the things that actually belong to you. If there are any. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need a final word or a dramatic exit. The audit was closed. The discrepancies were resolved. I walked through the crowd, the sea of elite socialites parting from me like I was a ghost. I stepped out into the cool, damp Atherton night. The air didn't smell like eucalyptus anymore. It smelled like rain. It smelled like the truth. I got into my car and started the engine and didn't look back at the glass house. I had crushed their world with nothing but a USB drive and the truth, and for the first time in my life, the weight in my chest was gone. The drive south on Highway 1 is a lesson in perspective. To my left, the Santa Cruz Mountains rose like jagged teeth. To my right, the Pacific Ocean stretched into an infinite, bruised blue. I had left the glass and steel of the valley 3 hours ago, and with every mile of winding asphalt, the phantom weight of the Vance name seemed to peel away in the wind. I was driving my Porsche paid for in full, titled, in my name. A machine of German precision that didn't care about family legacies. The engine's purr was the only conversation I needed. I pulled over at a turnout just past the Bixby Creek Bridge. The air here was a different element entirely. It didn't smell like filtered eucalyptus or the ozone of a server room. It smelled of brine, decaying kelp, and wild coastal sage, a sharp, bracing scent that stung the back of my throat in the best possible way. I stepped out of the car. The wind hit me immediately. Cold and relentless, whipping my hair across my face. I didn't reach for a silk scarf to hold it back. I let it happen. I leaned against the hood and took out my phone. The screen was a chaotic mess of notifications. Missed call. Mother. 14. Text. Julian. You've destroyed everything. How could you? News alert. Aether AI CEO Julian Vance detained for questioning in federal fraud probe. Text mother. Elena. Answer me. The lawyers are here. Where's the money? I looked at the messages with the same detachment I'd used to review a voided check. There was no money. At least not for them. Julian had spent the future, and my mother had swallowed the present. They were finally facing the one thing they couldn't gaslight. A zero balance. I opened my contacts. Mother. Ihit block. Julian. Ihit delete. The Atherton landline. Delete. I went into my settings and initiated a factory reset on my secondary device, the one they had the number for. I watched the screen go black. Then show the Apple logo. Then return to the hello screen in a dozen different languages. Data point 7. Total liquidation. To build something new, you must first clear the site of all hazardous waste. I tossed the phone into the passenger seat. I wouldn't be turning it back on. I had a new SIM card in the glove box and a satellite phone for work. For the first time in 35 years. I was unlisted. I was a ghost in their machine. And they were finally, mercifully, dead to mine. I walked to the edge of the cliff. The drop was hundreds of feet down to the churning, white-capped surf. The sound was a roar, a massive prosen. Rhythmic percussion of water hitting stone. It made the screaming matches of my childhood feel like whispers. It made the Series C Gala feel like a glitch in a dream. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single physical item I'd taken from the house. A small, silver monogrammed cufflink Julian had dropped in the hallway years ago. It was a symbol of everything he pretended to be. I didn't throw it with anger. I simply opened my hand and let the wind take it. It vanished into the gray mist before it even hit the water. I stood there for a long time, watching the sun begin its slow, heavy descent toward the horizon. The sky turned a violent shade of violet and gold. My internal monologue, usually a frantic ledger of debts and social strategies, was quiet for the first time. I wasn't auditing the room. I wasn't looking for the exit. I wasn't bracing for a strike. I was just there. The ledger was balanced. The fraud was exposed. The scapegoat had left the altar. And the golden child was in a cage of his own making. I turned back to my car. The gravel crunching under my boots, a solid prasted. Real sound. I felt the cool leather of the steering wheel and the salt on my skin. I put the car in gear and continued south, toward a cabin in the redwoods, where no one knew my name and no one cared about my vibrations. The road ahead was dark, winding, and entirely my own. I took a deep breath of the cold, wild air, and for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel like an auditor. I felt like the owner of the firm